My boyfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. We tried phone sex. When I first met Ethan, it was like stepping into a vibrant, dreamlike world where everything shimmered with promise and excitement. I was 23, fresh out of college, and the future felt like a blank canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of my adventures. Ethan, at 26, had this infectious energy that drew me in from the moment we locked eyes at a mutual friend's party. He wasn't the kind of guy you'd immediately peg as drop-dead gorgeous. He didn't have the chiseled features or the meticulously styled hair that typically define conventional attractiveness. But he had this raw, magnetic charm that captivated me. His laughter was infectious, his stories engaging, and his gaze. Oh, his gaze had a way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the room. Our connection was instantaneous, a spark that set off a blazing fire of passion and infatuation. We spent the next few months in a whirlwind romance, stealing kisses in the rain, staying up late to talk about our dreams and fears, and exploring each other's bodies with an intensity that left me breathless. Every touch, every whisper, every look felt electric. He was the best lover I'd ever had, attentive, skilled, and completely in tune with my desires. I would wake up in his arms, feeling like I was exactly where I was meant to be, and the sex, oh, the sex was out of this world. It wasn't just about the physical pleasure, though that was incredible. It was about the connection, the way he made me feel seen, desired, and cherished. We were inseparable, and I felt like I had found my soulmate. It wasn't just about the physical attraction, though that was a big part of it. Ethan and I shared a deep emotional connection. We laughed at the same jokes, loved the same obscure indie bands, and could talk for hours without running out of things to say. It felt like we were perfectly in sync, like two halves of a whole finally coming together. I helped him feel loved in a way he hadn't experienced before, and he brought out a side of me that I didn't even know existed. Together, we were a force of nature, unstoppable and undeniably in love. But as they say, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. After a blissful year together, Ethan received a job offer in another state that was too good to pass up. It was a huge opportunity for him, a chance to advance his career and make a real difference. I was so proud of him, and I supported his decision wholeheartedly, even though it meant we'd have to navigate the treacherous waters of a long-distance relationship. We promised each other that we'd make it work, that our love was strong enough to withstand any challenge. We believed in us, and for a while, that belief was enough. The first year apart was tough, but we managed. We stayed connected through nightly phone calls, text messages, and frequent video chats. We even managed to keep our sexual connection alive through phone sex and steamy messages that left me aching for his touch. It wasn't the same as being together, but it was a lifeline that kept our relationship afloat. Every visit was a chance to rekindle the flame, to remind ourselves of the physical connection that had been such a vital part of our relationship. I would count down the days until I could see him again, and when we were finally together, it was like no time had passed at all. The sex was still amazing, the chemistry still palpable, and I would bask in the afterglow of our lovemaking, feeling content and deeply loved. But as time went on, the cracks started to appear. The phone calls that had once been filled with laughter and longing began to feel routine, the texts became shorter, and the video chats less frequent. Our once thriving sexual connection started to fizzle out, and phone sex, which had been a thrilling way to stay intimate, started to feel like a chore. I found it harder and harder to get in the mood, to feel the same raw desire that had once consumed me. I missed him desperately, but there was also a growing sense of emptiness, a feeling that something essential was slipping away. The visits, which I had once looked forward to with such excitement, began to feel different too. I still loved being with him, still enjoyed our time together, but the intense passion that had once driven me seemed to be fading. I felt a strange pressure to make every moment count, to rekindle the spark that had once burned so brightly between us. I wanted to want him with the same intensity as before, to feel that overwhelming urge to tear his clothes off and lose myself in the heat of the moment. But more often than not, I found myself going through the motions. The sex was still good. Ethan was skilled, attentive, and always eager to please. I had orgasms, and they felt good, but the emotional and physical craving that had once driven me was missing. I started to worry. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I feel the same way I used to? Ethan was still the same man I fell in love with, kind, considerate, funny, and always trying so hard to make me happy. He meant well, and I knew he loved me deeply. But something inside me had changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. The guilt was unbearable. Here was this amazing guy, doing everything he could to keep our relationship alive, and I couldn't muster the same level of attraction I once felt. I started to doubt myself, to question whether I was being fair to him, whether I was letting him down. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant presence that weighed heavily on my heart. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being selfish, if I was asking too much. I wanted to be attracted to him, to feel that same overwhelming desire, but I couldn't force it. I tried to distract myself with work, with hobbies, with anything that could take my mind off the growing chasm between us. I even tried to reignite my own sexuality by spending time alone, exploring my desires, hoping that it would somehow translate into a renewed attraction for him. But nothing seemed to work. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the problem wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychological, and deeply tied to the challenges of maintaining a long-distance relationship. I couldn't help but wonder if the distance was to blame for my dwindling desire. It's incredibly hard to keep the spark alive when you only get to see each other a few weeks a year. The anticipation, the build-up, the longing, it can only sustain you for so long. Eventually, the reality of not being able to touch, to hold, to be physically present with the person you love starts to wear you down. The phone calls and video chats, while helpful, aren't a substitute for real, tangible intimacy. They can't replace the feeling of his arms around me, the warmth of his body next to mine, the way his eyes light up when he sees me. I was happy when we were together, but those moments were few and far between. And every time we said goodbye, it felt like a piece of my heart was being torn away. I hated feeling this way, hated the way the distance had come between us. I wanted so badly to find a way to reignite the passion, to feel that overwhelming attraction again, but I didn't know how. And I didn't know how much longer we could keep going like this before the distance and the doubts tore us apart. Every now and then, I would get a flash of the old attraction, a fleeting moment when I would see him and feel that familiar rush of desire. Those moments were like tiny beacons of hope, making me believe that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to the way they were. But they never lasted long enough to bring about any real change. As soon as we were apart again, the doubts and the guilt would creep back in, leaving me feeling more confused and lost than ever. I began to dread our visits, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I feared the pressure and the expectations. I would lie awake the night before, anxiety gnawing at my insides, wondering if this time would be different, if this time the old spark would return. And when it didn't, I felt like I was failing him, failing us. Ethan, bless his heart, never pressured me, never made me feel like I was doing anything wrong. He was patient, understanding, and always ready to reassure me that he loved me no matter what. But I could see the hurt in his eyes, the silent questions he didn't dare to ask, and it broke my heart. I tried to talk to him about it, to explain what I was feeling, but words failed me. How do you tell someone you love that you're struggling to feel attracted to them? How do you admit that the distance is wearing you down, that you're not sure if you can keep going like this? I didn't want to hurt him, didn't want to shatter the fragile hope that still lingered between us. So I kept my doubts to myself, buried my fears deep inside, and tried to put on a brave face. But the truth was, I was scared, scared that the distance had done irreparable damage, scared that I would never feel the same way again, scared that I was letting down the one person who had always been there for me. I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to give up on us. But I didn't know how to fix what was broken. I felt trapped, caught between my love for him and the reality of our situation. As the months passed, the weight of my doubts and guilt grew heavier. I found myself pulling away, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us. I missed the way things used to be, missed the ease and the passion that had once defined our relationship. I wanted so badly to find a way back to that, to rekindle the spark and feel that same overwhelming desire. But the harder I tried, the more elusive it seemed. I started to wonder if maybe we had reached the end of our journey, if maybe it was time to let go. The thought of breaking up with Ethan was unbearable, a pain that twisted in my chest and left me gasping for breath. He was my best friend, my lover, my confidant. Letting him go felt like losing a part of myself, like cutting out a piece of my heart. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stuck, that we were both holding on to something that had changed beyond recognition. I knew that I needed to make a decision, that I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I loved Ethan, and I didn't want to hurt him, but I also couldn't ignore my own feelings. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I needed to find a way to either reignite the spark or to let him go, to free both of us from the weight of unfulfilled expectations and lingering doubts. As I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the pictures of us that lined my walls, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to bridge the gap, to find our way back to each other. I know it wouldn't be easy, I know it would take time, effort, and a lot of soul-searching, but I was willing to try, because despite everything, I still loved him. And maybe, just maybe, that love would be enough to reignite the spark, to bring back the passion that had once burned so brightly between us. I decided to take the first step, to reach out to him and have an honest conversation about what I was feeling. It was terrifying, the thought of laying my heart bare and risking rejection. But I owed it to him, and to myself, to be truthful. I called him that night, my heart pounding in my chest, and we talked for hours. I told him about my doubts, my fears, and my struggles to feel the same way I once did. I told him how much I loved him, how much I wanted to make things work, but that I didn't know how. Ethan listened, his voice gentle and soothing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. He didn't have all the answers, but he was willing to work with me, to try and find a way forward. We talked about our feelings, our needs, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, and there were a lot of tears, but by the end of the conversation, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. We decided to take things one day at a time, to focus on rebuilding our connection and finding new ways to stay close despite the distance. It wasn't a magical fix, and it didn't solve all our problems overnight, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of the old passion, a hint of the desire that had once defined our relationship. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there. As I hung up the phone that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I wasn't alone. Ethan and I were in this together, and that gave me the strength to keep going. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and that there would be more challenges ahead, but I was willing to fight for us, to fight for the love that had once burned so brightly. And maybe, just maybe, we would find our way back to each other, one step at a time.